Good afternoon, y'all, or around noon, I should say. Welcome to another video on the Luderco Arms channel. So, we're going to do a quick little video and talk about the subject of stacking tolerances and what it is, what it means, and some real world examples. So, what stacking tolerances means, whenever a machine, be it a firearm, a vehicle, a brake system, an engine, is manufactured, each individual part has specifications it is manufactured to. There'll be blueprint drawings, and on those blueprint drawings, every dimension of the part is going to be drawn out, and in most cases, the measurements will be given in thousandths of an inch and a plus or minus. So that plus or minus is because it's almost impossible to manufacture two parts exactly the same. There's a tolerance. So as long as it falls within the tolerance, then the part should work. When you run into problems is when you take multiple parts that have all been manufactured within their tolerances. Sometimes, if you get certain parts that are out of tolerance one way and you combine, or I shouldn't say out of tolerance, if you get a part that is on the far end of the tolerance one direction and combine it with a part that is on the far end of tolerance in the other direction, then you can run into a problem where when you combine the two parts, though they are within specifications, they may not work together. They may jam up or be too loose, cause problems. So an example of this, I think that all of the problems that the SIG pistol is having, the M17, what is it, the 320 or whatever it is. I don't know if it's 320 right off the top of my head. I'd have to go look on the computer. But the military contract pistol, I believe that the problem that pistol is having, where some of them perform flawlessly and some of them will all of a sudden fire themselves, is a case of stacking tolerances. Now, I can't prove it because, you know, I don't have access to enough examples of them that I could take apart and measure all the parts. But it seems to me that what's going on is a case where I believe certain of the pistols have enough parts that, and again, they may all be within tolerance, but if they're at one end or the other of the tolerances, you can eventually, especially the more parts you add, you can eventually get to a point where it does not perform the way you want it to. I can give you another example, and this actually came into the shop recently. Now, normally you've got to have multiple parts involved in order to have a stacking tolerance situation. Normally, just two parts is not a stacking tolerances situation so much as it is a out of tolerance. But I had a situation the other week. Well, it's actually been about 2 or 3 months ago now. Anyways, a customer brought in a 300 Win Mag bolt action rifle. And the problem was he fired it one time, ejected the cartridge, and when he went to put the next cartridge into chamber, it would not chamber. So I said, okay. And I put him in the queue, and usually I have several guns waiting on service, so they're not always I don't always get on stuff right away. I usually have to leave something with me for a few weeks. you know, I work a full-time job and then I do this stuff in my spare time, non-existent spare time. So anyways, when I got around to looking at it, I had got him to leave the box of ammunition with me that he had been using, and it was factory bought ammunition. It was not reloads or, you know, any of the things that you would usually associate with that sort of problem. And when he brought it to me, I just assumed that he had probably had a case neck separation that was stuck in the chamber. So when I got around to working on it, I stuck my light up in there, and lo and behold, there is no nothing stuck in the chamber. So I got to looking at the ammunition. Well, it was a brand new box of Winchester 300 Win Mag ammo. Not the, there is no cheap 300 Win Mag ammo, but not the most expensive ammo, but it still should have been fine. So then I get to thinking, well, maybe we have a tolerance problem. So I get my belted Magnum headspace gauges out and check, and the rifle does have a tight chamber, but it's within specs. It passes the headspace go, no go with flying colors. But the chamber, it is a tight chamber. Now remember that, because that's he's on the tight side of the tolerance on the chamber. So then I start looking at the ammunition, and I didn't have one, so I went. I bought a SAAMI spec ammo check gauge. Which, if you don't know what an ammo check gauge is, it's a little gauge that you can stick a completed round of ammunition into to see if it will chamber in a rifle. So I got the SAAMI gauge and I checked, and every round of ammo in that box, which is a 20 round box, there were 19 rounds left in it, every single round would pass that SAAMI check. So they should have chambered, but a few of them were a little tight. Not to the point of not passing, but definitely tight. Well, then when you combine the tight rounds of ammo, because what I did is I separated them out. Now every round of ammo passed the ammo check gauge, but some of them were a little tighter than others. So the ones that were tight I separated out. So I took the ones that weren't tight, and they would chamber in the rifle no problem. No problem at all. And took the ones that were tight, well, they wouldn't chamber. Now, once I figured out that the problem was a chamber on the very small, on the small end of the acceptable size, and ammo that was on the larger size end, I went ahead and pushed the bolt on forward and found that all of the ammo would chamber, but it took a little bit of force on those rounds there. So I went ahead and test fired it, and everything was fine. So basically what it boiled down to is there was nothing wrong with his rifle, and there's nothing wrong with his ammunition. But the two tolerances stacked together didn't like it. They didn't like each other. So I can give you another example, and this happened to me when I was 17 years old. So I had a Volkswagen. I actually owned probably 10 different Volkswagens from the time I was 16 to the time I went in the Army, and probably 15 more after that point. But at the time I had a Volkswagen, and it was the same. It was my very first car that ran, and I was had very little experience, but I loved working on cars, but I didn't have a lot of experience doing it. If you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm sweeping the floor. So I get the car, and we've had it for a while. We moved from Texas to here, and I actually moved that car in the back of a moving van, believe it or not, with all of our furniture and everything else. So anyways, we moved here. My dad had to transfer. He worked for Bechtel, which is, if you don't know, is a big ass construction company. And we were transferring from the South Texas nuclear project to the Savannah River site. Anyways, that's not really part of the story, but so we lived here, and you know, I had this car, and I was learning how to work on it, and we were solid middle class. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor. But my dad and mom both believed in, you know, you need to get a job, you need to do for yourself. And so, you know, my car was my responsibility, and that was great. I liked it. But I had to, you know, keep it up, keep it running, keep the insurance paid on it, and all that good stuff. So anyways, I needed some brakes. My brakes were shot. The pads were completely gone. It's drum brakes. The wheel cylinders were leaking on the back of it, and the brake shoes were just completely gone. And being the enterprising 17-year-old that I was, I had a job bussing tables, so I didn't have a lot of money. I had, you know, and most of the money I did get, honestly, went to, you know, having fun and chasing girls. So when my car needed brakes, I did what most people who don't know any better and have been to a wrecking yard did. I took my butt straight on over to Graves Auto Salvage, which is still in existence today, although back in those days it was you could go on the yard, and basically you went out there with your tools, and like a pull apart, you did your own, you know, you pulled the part off you wanted and you carried it up to the counter, and they would give you a price on it, and you would pay it and take the part with you. So my car needing brakes and everything, and me not having a lot of money, I thought, well, you know, I will go to the wrecking yard there and get everything I need. Why spend what to a 16-year-old in the late 1980s was an exorbitant sum of money. Hold on. To buy new wheel cylinders and all that good stuff when I could just go to the wrecking yard and get stuff off of a wrecked car that was like brand new. The only problem is, at that point, even the newest Volkswagen in the wrecking yard was 20 years old. So anyways, I went there and I went through all the cars in all the Volkswagens in the yard. I got the best brake shoes, and when I say the best set of brake shoes, I must stress that this was it was a set, but it came off of 4 different cars. You know, I got the best looking brake shoe from each car, and all the little hardware and the wheel cylinders and everything, and I carried all the stuff back home, and I put my brakes together. And they didn't work that great because those brake pads had worn into, you know, their respective brake drums on their cars there in the wrecking yard, whatever they had originally been on. But you know, so if you're familiar with drum brakes, you know, you turn the adjuster until they lock up, and then you back the adjuster off until you have just the tiniest bit of drag, and your brakes are adjusted. Well, if you do that with a set of brake shoes that have worn into a different vehicle and are out of shape, you get kind of a false reading. So it boils down to all these parts were combined, and I had the 2 brake shoes in there, and they're off of 2 different cars. And then so I had my brake drum, and then you had your 1 brake shoe here and your other brake shoe here, and then there's the centerpiece here, and it's got some notches and all that good stuff. You got your wheel cylinder up here and your adjuster down here. So the problem I ran into is on a Volkswagen, there's a bar that goes in a notch here and here, and it goes across here, and that bar is for the parking brake, and it's got a little spring around it. It's square, you know, it's just a piece of flat bar. It's got a little spring around it, and it sits in them 2 slots, and when you push the brakes, it pushes the pads. And the problem is, because I had this pad from one manufacturer, this pad from another manufacturer, this brake drum was original and probably pretty worn, a wheel cylinder from something else, and I had stuck all this stuff together in there. Well, when I adjusted the brakes, they were loose because these had already worn, so they were hitting before, they weren't seated into the drum. And what happened was, it worked for a couple of days. But then I went to school one day, and I pulled in the parking lot there and threw the emergency brake on, cut the car off, got out, went into school, came back out that afternoon, got in the car, started it up, let the parking brake off, and the car would not friggin' move. It would stall the engine out every time. It would not move. And what it had happened was, inside of the left rear brake drum, this bar had, when I put the parking brake on, it spread those pads out all as far as they would go, and that bar fell out. And it jammed down here, and it jammed that so tight that we ended up having to take the hub off. And if you're familiar with a Volkswagen Beetle, the brake drum is splined, and it fits onto the drive shaft and has a 36mm nut holds it on. And so I had a beater wrench for that 36mm, and I called my dad. He came out. We tried to loosen the slack adjuster to try to get the brakes to back off. Well, they wouldn't back off because that bar had fell down in there. And so what we ended up doing was beating the damn drum off of it. And we finally got them broke loose, took it back to the house, and I learned the valuable lesson that you don't buy any sort of brake parts from the wrecking yard. So unless it's something like a master cylinder or wheel cylinder that you are going to hone out and put a rebuild kit in, and you know how to do it, don't buy parts from the wrecking yard for brakes. But this was stacking tolerances. Every part in here that I combined was out of tolerance. Every one of them. And so when you combine that all together, even though every one of these parts individually was correct, I got Volkswagen brake drum brake pads, shoes. They were all the right parts, but combined together, they put me in a nightmare. And this, I think, is what's happening with those SIG pistols. They've got all of their parts are manufactured by subcontractors, and then they're combined together. And I think that they just have a case where some of the pistols, by the time you stack all the tolerances together, they're shooting by themselves, letting the yeah, that's a bad situation. But anyways, so that's stacking tolerances. There's probably people that could explain it better than I can. You know, I can do machine work and stuff, but I'm not a machinist. I'm a millwright. So There's probably fancier scientific ways of explaining all this, but basically it boils down to you got a bunch of parts. They can all be in tolerance, but depending on where on the tolerance they are, when you combine them, they may not work. And that is what is referred to as stacking tolerances. So, appreciate y'all watching. Hopefully this wasn't too boring. And if you like the story about the sketchy repair on Volkswagens, I've got tons of those, man. That's all I drove until I was in my 20s, was Volkswagens, and most of them back then were sketchily repaired. Not because I didn't. Hold on. Yeah, hello. Oh, yeah, I got my keys. Love you too. Bye. Sorry about that. Anyways, where was I? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of things with Volkswagens that probably shouldn't have been done, and a lot of things that were really cool too. But those are subjects for another video. If y'all want to hear about them, let me know. As for this video, appreciate y'all watching, and y'all have a good one. We'll see you in the next video.